Morality feels obvious until it isn't. We praise, blame, condemn, and justify as if right and wrong were written into the world itself. But what is morality really? What if right and wrong are not carved into the universe, but whispered into us by something far older? Every day, without hesitation, we judge. We praise kindness. We condemn cruelty. We feel guilt burn like a warning light, and pride rise like a quiet sunrise. It feels automatic, inevitable, as if morality were gravity itself, pulling us toward what is right. But history tells a stranger story. Across time and cultures, what was once sacred becomes forbidden. What was once monstrous becomes normal. And still, we feel that some things must be wrong, no matter who believes otherwise. So where does morality come from? Is it written into the fabric of reality, like the laws that bind stars together? Or is it something fragile and human, shaped by survival, by stories, by fear, by hope? To answer that, we have to go back. Back before laws, before philosophy, back to a world where being moral might have meant simply staying alive. Long before morality became a question, it was a condition, a quiet pressure shaping behavior in a world that offered no mercy. Imagine the earliest humans moving through landscapes that did not care whether they lived or died. Cold nights, scarce food, predators that hunted without hesitation. In that world, survival was not an individual achievement. It was a collective one. Alone, a human was fragile. Together, humans endured. According to evolutionary biology, this simple fact changed everything. Natural selection does not favor goodness. It favors what works. And cooperation worked. Groups that shared food survived drought. Groups that protected the injured preserved knowledge. Groups that punished betrayal avoided collapse. Over thousands of generations, behaviors that strengthened the group became more common, not because they were noble, but because they kept people alive. This is where morality begins its long, unfinished story. At the biological level, the roots are visible. Empathy, for example, is not uniquely human. Primates console one another. Elephants grieve their dead. Rats refuse rewards if it harms another. Neuroscience shows that when humans witness pain, the same neural circuits activate as if the pain were their own. According to many researchers, this capacity to feel with others laid the groundwork for moral concern. Not rules, not commandments, but feeling. Yet empathy alone was not enough. Groups also needed structure, predictability, trust. Anthropologists studying small-scale societies observe a pattern repeated across continents and eras. Behaviors that threaten group survival, unchecked violence, theft, deception, are discouraged. Behaviors that strengthen bonds, generosity, loyalty, bravery, are praised. Over time, these preferences crystallize into norms. Norms harden into traditions. Traditions become moral codes. What begins as survival becomes obligation. Some evolutionary psychologists describe morality as a social technology, a set of emotional instincts and learned rules that regulate life in large groups. Guilt discourages selfishness. Shame enforces reputation. Anger motivates punishment. Gratitude strengthens alliances. None of these emotions evolved to make us virtuous. They evolved to make us reliable. And reliability, in a dangerous world, is priceless. But morality did not emerge all at once. It layered itself slowly, like sediment. Early moral systems were often narrow. Concern extended first to kin, then to tribe, then to allies. Outsiders were not immoral to harm. They were irrelevant. Archaeological evidence and historical records show that early societies often paired strong internal cooperation with extreme external violence. This reveals a hard truth. Morality, at its origin, was not universal. It was selective. As groups grew larger, something shifted. Agriculture allowed permanent settlements. Settlements required coordination among strangers. Strangers needed rules. According to sociologists, this pressure led to shared myths, rituals, and moral narratives, stories that explained not just how to live, but why. Religion often filled this role. Moral rules were no longer just practical. They were sacred, tied to ancestors, to spirits, to gods who watched even when no one else did. Studies in cognitive science of religion suggest that belief in moralizing supernatural agents increased cooperation in large societies by making norm violations feel costly, even in private. morality gained eyes. But biology and belief were only part of the picture. Environment mattered too. In harsh climates, cultures often developed strict norms and strong punishment. In abundant environments, moral systems tended to be more flexible. According to cross-cultural psychology, values shift in response to ecological pressure. Morality adapts. This adaptability is one of its defining features. Still, adaptation has a cost. If morality changes with circumstance, does that mean it has no stable core? Or does the core hide beneath the variation? Even as moral rules differed, patterns emerged. Care for children, condemnation of betrayal, respect for fairness within the group. Anthropologists such as Franz de Waal argue that these patterns point to a moral grammar shaped by evolution, a set of tendencies rather than laws. Not commandments written in stone, but inclinations written in flesh. And yet, something curious happens as societies mature. Moral rules begin to turn back on themselves. People ask not just how to behave, but whether the rules themselves are just. Slavery, once accepted across civilizations, becomes morally contested. Hierarchies once seen as natural are questioned. Practices justified for survival lose their force as conditions change. This suggests that morality is not frozen at its origin. It grows beyond it. The instincts that once protected small groups now struggle in a global world. Empathy evolved for faces we can see, not millions we will never meet. Our moral emotions lag behind our power. According to many scholars, this mismatch explains much of modern ethical conflict. We are equipped with Stone Age feelings, navigating a planetary civilization. So is morality nothing more than a survival strategy dressed in meaning? Or did survival merely light the spark for something deeper? The origin of morality explains how it began, but it does not explain why we still feel that some things should matter, even when survival is not at stake. To answer that, we must turn inward, from evolution to reflection, from instinct to insight, because somewhere along the way, humanity did something unexpected. It began to search for morality not just in what helped us live, but in what it meant to be right. At some point, morality stopped being just something we did, and became something we examined. Humans began to step outside their instincts and ask a dangerous question. Not what helps us survive, but what should we do? This shift did not happen all at once. It unfolded slowly, across centuries, across civilizations that never met. In ancient Greece, thinkers like Socrates walked through crowded streets asking strangers why they believed what they believed. In ancient India, philosophers debated duty, suffering, and the nature of right action. In China, Confucian scholars reflected on harmony, obligation, and moral cultivation. These traditions were different, yet strangely aligned in one belief: that morality could be understood, not merely obeyed, not merely inherited, but discovered through reason, reflection, and dialogue. This idea, that morality exists as something to uncover, changed everything. Some philosophers argued that moral truths are like mathematical truths, not invented, but revealed. According to this view, when we say something is wrong, we are not expressing preference. We are pointing to a fact about the world. Immanuel Kant famously proposed that moral laws arise from reason itself. If rational beings exist, then certain actions must follow. To treat others merely as tools, he argued, is always wrong, regardless of outcome. This was a radical claim. It suggested morality does not depend on culture, emotion, or even survival. It depends on logic. Modern cognitive science offers a different lens, but one that still hints at discovery. Research in moral psychology shows that humans across cultures often share deep moral intuitions. Experiments by psychologists such as Jonathan Haidt suggest that people consistently react to fairness, harm, loyalty, and betrayal, even when raised in very different societies. These reactions feel immediate, almost perceptual, as if we are seeing moral meaning. Neuroscience adds another layer. Brain imaging studies reveal that moral judgment activates networks involved in emotion, social reasoning, and abstract thought. When people confront moral dilemmas, they are not merely calculating outcomes. They are engaging systems evolved for understanding minds, intentions, and relationships. This suggests that morality may emerge from how human cognition is structured, not written in the stars, but written into the way we think. Some philosophers call this moral realism grounded in human nature. The idea that while moral truths may not exist independently of minds, they are not arbitrary either. Given creatures like us, social, empathetic, self-aware, certain moral patterns naturally arise. Causing unnecessary suffering feels wrong not because we were told so, but because our minds are built to register it as a violation. In this sense, morality is discovered the way language is discovered. Children are not taught every rule explicitly. They infer structure. They sense patterns. They internalize norms long before they can explain them. But discovery does not guarantee agreement. Even when people share moral intuitions, they often disagree about how to apply them. Is justice about equality or fairness? Is loyalty a virtue or a danger? Should intention matter more than outcome? Philosophers have debated these questions for millennia, not because morality is meaningless, but because it is complex. Consider the trolley problem, a famous thought experiment used in ethics and neuroscience. A runaway trolley threatens several people. You can divert it, saving them, but harming one instead. Studies show that most people feel torn. Emotional systems push one way. Rational calculation pushes another. There is no easy answer, only tension. This tension reveals something crucial. Morality is not a single rule. It is a landscape, a space of competing values that must be navigated, not solved. Some researchers argue that moral progress occurs when we refine this navigation. Over time, societies expand the circle of moral concern. Groups once excluded, foreigners, women, enslaved people, animals, are gradually recognized as morally relevant. Historical data shows a long-term decline in certain forms of violence, alongside growing emphasis on human rights. According to scholars like Steven Pinker, this may reflect the slow influence of reason, empathy, and institutions. Others caution that progress is fragile. Moral insight does not move in a straight line. It can stall. It can reverse. Rationalization often serves power. History offers countless examples of moral language used to justify cruelty, which raises an unsettling possibility. What if morality feels discovered not because it exists independently, but because our minds are wired to experience certain judgments as necessary? The sense of moral certainty may itself be an evolved feature, a way to motivate action, a way to bind groups. When we feel that something is unquestionably wrong, we act decisively. We do not hesitate. According to some evolutionary theorists, this feeling of objectivity gives morality its force. It feels found, even if it is made. And yet, that explanation does not fully satisfy, because humans often act morally when it costs them, when no one is watching, when survival would be easier without it. People refuse to betray strangers. They sacrifice comfort for principle. They die for ideals that offer no evolutionary reward. Why? Some philosophers argue that this is where morality transcends its origins. That once humans became capable of reflection, morality stopped being just an adaptation and became a commitment. We began to hold ourselves to standards we could violate, but chose not to. In this view, morality is discovered through self-recognition, through the realization that others are as real as we are. This realization is not empirical. It cannot be measured like temperature or mass, but it is experienced. When we recognize another mind, another inner world, we encounter a demand, a sense that their suffering matters, not because it helps us, but because it is theirs. Whether this demand reflects an objective moral reality or a shared human construction remains unresolved. Philosophers still argue, scientists still test, cultures still disagree, but the search itself reveals something profound. Morality is not just behavior, it is inquiry. A species looking at itself, asking how it ought to live. And that inquiry leads inevitably to the hardest question of all. If morality feels discovered, does that mean it exists independently of us? Or is that feeling itself the final illusion? To face that question, we must step beyond origins and intuitions, beyond brains and behaviors. We must ask what morality is, not just where it comes from. And that takes us into speculation. If morality is discovered rather than invented, then it points beyond us, beyond biology, beyond culture, beyond preference. This idea is both comforting and terrifying. Comforting, because it suggests that some things are truly right or wrong, no matter who believes otherwise. that cruelty does not become acceptable through consensus, that injustice does not vanish when written into law. In this view, morality is not a popularity contest. It is a structure, silent, invisible, and binding. Terrifying, because it means we can be wrong, not mistaken in taste, but mistaken in truth. This position is often called moral realism, the belief that moral facts exist, even if humans disagree about them. According to moral realists, statements like "suffering is bad" are not merely expressions of emotion. They are claims about reality, similar in spirit, though not in method, to claims in science. But what kind of reality could moral facts belong to? They are not physical objects. You cannot weigh justice or photograph dignity. They do not behave like particles or forces. And yet, many philosophers argue that they are no less real for that. Numbers are not physical either, yet mathematics describes the universe with uncanny precision. Logic has no mass, yet it governs every argument. Some thinkers propose that morality belongs to this abstract realm, a domain of truths accessible through reason. Plato imagined moral forms, perfect, timeless standards of goodness that the world only imperfectly reflects. Modern philosophers are more cautious, but the intuition remains that moral truths exist whether or not we acknowledge them. That even in a universe without humans, it would still be wrong for conscious beings to suffer needlessly. Others ground moral realism in rational necessity. They argue that if any rational agent exists, certain principles must follow. For example, consistency. If I demand respect for my own interests, I must recognize similar interests in others. To deny this is not merely immoral, but incoherent. In this view, morality is not imposed from outside. It is built into what it means to reason at all. Science does not confirm this claim, but it brushes against it. Consider the phenomenon of convergence. Independent cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, often arrive at similar moral insights. Rules against murder within the group, norms of fairness, care for children, condemnation of betrayal. The details differ, but the patterns repeat. Some researchers suggest this convergence hints at underlying constraints, features of social life that shape moral systems in predictable ways. If morality were entirely arbitrary, such convergence would be unlikely. There is also the strange authority of moral experience. When people witness severe injustice, they often describe a sense of violation that feels objective. Not, "I dislike this," but "this must not happen." Neuroimaging shows heightened activity in brain regions associated with error detection and conflict when moral norms are violated, as if something in the world has gone wrong. This does not prove moral realism, but it explains why it feels persuasive. And if moral realism is true, the implications are enormous. It would mean that moral progress is not just change, but discovery. That when societies abolish slavery or expand rights, they are not merely adopting new values. They are correcting errors, moving closer to a moral truth that was always there. It would mean that future generations may judge us harshly, not because they are different, but because they are right. This idea reshapes responsibility. If moral truths exist, ignorance is not a shield. "Everyone did it" becomes a weak defense. Power does not grant permission. History becomes a record not just of events, but of moral failures and achievements measured against an external standard. Yet moral realism faces a profound challenge. If moral facts exist, where are they? Physics describes forces and particles. Biology explains life. Chemistry maps reactions. None of these disciplines require moral properties to function. The universe, as described by science, appears morally silent. Galaxies collide without guilt. Supernovae destroy without malice. Some critics argue that adding moral facts to this picture is unnecessary, a metaphysical excess. Why posit invisible moral truths when psychology and culture can explain our behavior? Moral realists respond that explanation is not the same as justification. Science can explain why we believe something is wrong. It cannot tell us whether it is wrong. Knowing the neural basis of empathy does not answer whether suffering matters. It only explains why we care. This distinction is subtle, but crucial. There is also the problem of disagreement. If moral truths exist, why do people disagree so deeply? Why do intelligent, sincere individuals reach opposite conclusions about abortion, war, punishment, or freedom? Some moral realists argue that disagreement exists in every domain, including science. Disagreement does not imply the absence of truth. It may reflect limited information, bias, or complexity. Moral questions often involve competing values, incomplete facts, and emotional weight. Error is not surprising. Others propose that moral truth may be underdetermined. That while some moral facts are clear, such as the wrongness of unnecessary suffering, others allow multiple permissible answers. Objectivity does not require simplicity. Still, doubts linger. If moral realism is true, why does morality feel so deeply tied to emotion? Why does outrage flare faster than reason? Why does moral certainty often harden into dogma? This leads to a more cautious interpretation. Some philosophers suggest that moral truths may be real, but our access to them is imperfect. That evolution equipped us with rough moral sensors, good enough for survival, but not precision instruments. Reason can refine these intuitions, but it cannot escape them entirely. In this view, morality is like perception. Vision gives us access to the world, but it is biased, limited, and easily fooled. Yet no one concludes that sight is therefore meaningless. We correct it with tools, with science, with shared inquiry. Perhaps morality requires the same humility. The danger of moral realism is certainty without reflection. The belief that one possesses the truth rather than seeks it. History shows how easily claims of moral objectivity can justify violence. Crusades, purges, genocides, all defended as moral necessity. This is not an argument against moral truth. It is an argument against arrogance. If morality is objective, then the task is not to enforce it blindly, but to approach it carefully. To treat moral belief as a hypothesis, strongly held, but always open to revision in light of reason, evidence, and empathy. And yet, even this tempered realism leaves one question unanswered. Why should moral facts, if they exist, matter to us? Why should an abstract truth compel action? Mathematical truths do not demand sacrifice. Physical laws do not ask us to care. But moral truths seem to place demands on our will. They reach into behavior. They insist. Some philosophers argue that this is the defining feature of morality. Its normativity, the sense that it is not just descriptive but binding. Not just true, but authoritative. If moral facts exist, then ignoring them is not neutral. It is a failure. This idea is powerful and dangerous because if morality is objective, then it may judge us more harshly than any court. It may reveal that convenience, tradition, and obedience are not excuses. That comfort often rests on invisible harm. That neutrality can be complicity. The implication is unsettling. We may already know more than we want to admit, which leads to a final tension. If morality is objective, then it transcends culture. But if it transcends culture, why does it speak in cultural language? Why does justice look different across societies? Why does the moral horizon shift with time? One answer is that culture is the lens, not the source. Moral truth is filtered through history, language, and power. As these change, clarity improves. Errors are corrected. Blind spots are exposed. Another answer is more troubling. That moral realism captures something real, but incomplete. That morality may have objective elements, without being fully independent of human perspective. That it emerges at the intersection of facts about the world and facts about us. About suffering, about agency, about vulnerability. If so, then morality is neither purely discovered nor purely invented. It is constrained, shaped by reality, but expressed through minds. And that possibility opens the door to a different way of thinking. One where morality is not fixed in the cosmos, but not arbitrary either. To explore that, we must turn to the other side of the question. What if morality is not something we uncover, but something we build? And what does that mean? For truth, power, and responsibility? That is where we go next. What if morality is not a hidden structure waiting to be uncovered, but a living system we continuously create? not discovered like a fossil, but assembled like a language. This idea begins with an uncomfortable observation. Moral rules change. They change across cultures. They change across time. They even change within a single lifetime. Practices once defended as natural or necessary can later feel unthinkable. What once inspired no shame can come to haunt entire civilizations. If morality were fully objective and fixed, why would this happen? According to moral constructivists, the answer is simple. Morality is not a feature of the universe. It is a feature of human social life. It emerges from negotiation, power, emotion, and shared meaning. It is not found in nature. It is made between people. This does not mean morality is fake. It means it is relational. Consider language. There is no English encoded into the cosmos. No law of physics demands nouns or verbs. And yet language is not arbitrary noise. It has structure, rules, constraints. It enables truth, beauty, and deception alike. Language evolves because humans use it to coordinate, to persuade, to survive. Constructivists argue morality functions the same way. Moral norms arise because humans must live together under conditions of vulnerability. We can harm each other. We can help each other. We must decide which actions will be praised, which will be punished, and which will be tolerated. Over time, these decisions solidify into norms that feel natural because we were born into them. What feels objective may simply feel familiar. Sociology supports this view. Studies show that moral beliefs often track social structure. In societies with rigid hierarchies, moral rules emphasize obedience and duty. In more egalitarian societies, morality emphasizes fairness and autonomy. When economic conditions shift, moral priorities often shift with them. Values adapt to incentives. Even concepts we treat as sacred, honor, purity, freedom, vary dramatically across cultures. Anthropologists have documented societies where actions considered deeply immoral in one place are morally neutral or even virtuous in another. These differences are not random. They reflect local histories, resources, threats, and power relations. From his perspective, morality is a tool, a way societies regulate behavior, a way groups define identity, a way power justifies itself. This is where the idea becomes unsettling. If morality is constructed, then it can be engineered, shaped, manipulated. History offers countless examples. Moral language has been used to sanctify war, enforce inequality, and suppress dissent. Those in power often present their interests as moral necessity. Critics are labeled immoral. Deviance becomes sin. If morality were truly objective, this manipulation would be harder. But if moral authority flows from social agreement, then controlling the narrative becomes controlling the good. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche took this insight to its extreme. He argued that moral systems are expressions of power, strategies by which groups impose their values on others. According to this view, what we call morality is often the moralization of advantage. The strong define strength as virtue. The weak define restraint as virtue. Morality, in this telling, is not about truth. It is about control. Modern social psychology echoes parts of this critique. Research shows that moral judgments are often post hoc rationalizations. We feel first, then justify. Moral outrage can bind groups together, but it can also distort perception. Studies demonstrate that people are more likely to excuse harm committed by their own group, while condemning identical harm by outsiders. Morality does not just regulate behavior, it defends identity. And yet, to reduce morality entirely to manipulation feels incomplete, because people often resist immoral norms, even when resistance is dangerous. Whistleblowers, dissidents, abolitionists, individuals who defy their culture's moral consensus and are later celebrated as heroes. If morality is constructed, how do such challenges arise? Constructivists respond that moral systems contain internal tensions. Norms are not monolithic. They are negotiated between competing values, fairness and loyalty, order and compassion, security and freedom. When circumstances change or contradictions sharpen, moral frameworks crack. New values emerge not from discovering eternal truths, but from rebalancing priorities. For example, the expansion of moral concern to previously excluded groups can be understood as a consequence of changing social conditions. Increased communication, economic interdependence, exposure to different perspectives. As people encounter others as individuals rather than abstractions, empathy expands. Moral boundary shift. From this view, moral progress is not convergence toward truth. It is convergence toward inclusion. This interpretation has powerful implications. If morality is constructed, then it is our responsibility. There is no cosmic safety net, no external authority to guarantee justice. What we allow becomes normal. What we normalize becomes invisible. Moral failure is not a misunderstanding of truth, but a failure of imagination and courage. This makes morality fragile, but also flexible. It means we can redesign it. Consider human rights. They are often described as universal and self-evident. Yet historically, they are recent. They emerge from specific political struggles, revolutions, and catastrophes. They were debated, drafted, rejected, revised. They did not descend from nature. They were claimed. And once claimed, they reshaped the world. A constructivist would say this does not weaken human rights. It strengthens them, because their authority comes not from metaphysics, but from collective commitment. They exist because we insist they exist, because enough people agree to treat certain boundaries as inviolable. The danger is obvious. If morality depends on agreement, what happens when agreement collapses? What happens when empathy shrinks? When fear dominates? History shows how quickly moral norms can erode under pressure. Genocide is often preceded not by hatred, but by moral reclassification. Victims are framed as threats, parasites, or burdens. Once they fall outside the moral circle, harm becomes permissible. This suggests that morality is not stable by default. It must be maintained. Constructivists argue that moral systems require constant reinforcement through education, storytelling, institutions, and accountability. Without these, moral norms decay, not because people become evil, but because incentives change. This perspective reframes guilt and responsibility. If morality is constructed, then moral failure is not just individual weakness. It is systemic breakdown. Bad systems produce bad behavior. Blame alone is insufficient. Reform requires redesign. But critics of constructivism raise a sharp objection. If morality is constructed, can anything truly be wrong? If a society agrees that cruelty is acceptable, on what grounds can we condemn it? Constructivists respond that morality does not require external objectivity to function. What matters is coherence with shared values. If a society claims to value well-being, dignity, or fairness, then practices that undermine those values can be criticized as inconsistent. Moral critique becomes internal rather than absolute. This allows for condemnation without metaphysics. Yet this answer leaves some unsatisfied, because it seems to limit moral criticism to those who already share our values. It struggles to explain why we feel justified in condemning practices across cultures and eras. Why we say slavery was wrong, even when widely accepted. Why we believe some actions should never be permitted, no matter who agrees. Constructivism explains how moral systems change. But does it explain why we feel bound by them? Some philosophers attempt a synthesis. They argue that morality is constructed, but constrained. That while humans invent moral rules, they do so under pressure from real features of the world. Suffering is real. Vulnerability is real. Dependence is real. Any moral system that ignores these facts becomes unstable. In this view, morality is like engineering. We design structures, but physics limits will stand. A bridge can take many forms, but not all designs will hold weight. Similarly, moral systems can vary, but those that generate excessive harm tend to collapse or provoke resistance. This does not make morality objective in the traditional sense. but it makes it accountable to reality. It also reframes disagreement. Moral conflict becomes less about right versus wrong and more about trade-offs. Competing values, different visions of the good life. Politics becomes moral engineering, deciding which costs are acceptable and who bears them. This view explains why moral certainty is so dangerous. When people believe their moral system is not constructed, they stop revising it. They stop listening. They treat dissent as corruption rather than information. History shows that the worst atrocities are often committed by those who believe they are morally pure. Constructivism urges humility, not because nothing matters, but because everything matters, and we might be wrong. It also shifts the focus from abstract truth to lived impact. Instead of asking whether a rule aligns with eternal law, we ask what it does, who it protects, who it harms, whose voice it amplifies, whose suffering it ignores. This does not eliminate moral disagreement. It makes it unavoidable, and perhaps that is the point. If morality is constructed, then moral life is not about obedience. It is about participation. We are not subjects of morality. We are its authors, whether we choose to be or not. Every law, every custom, every silence writes a line. This is both a burden and a power, because if morality is built, then the future is not waiting to be discovered. It is waiting to be shaped. The moral horizon is not fixed. It expands as we expand it. It contracts when we retreat. But this also means there is no final answer. No point at which morality is complete. No state of perfection. Only ongoing negotiation between what we value and what we learn. So, where does this leave us? Between realism and constructivism. Between truth and choice. Between discovery and design. One view offers authority without flexibility. The other offers flexibility without certainty. Perhaps morality is not fully captured by either. Perhaps morality is a process, a conversation stretched across generations. Not a law written into the universe, and not a whim invented at will, but a fragile, evolving attempt to live together without destroying one another. If that is so, then morality does not ask us to find the right answer once and for all. It asks us to keep asking, to revise, to listen, to expand the circle again and again. And that realization brings us to the final question. Not where morality comes from, or whether it is real, but what we are willing to do with it. Because in the end, morality may not be something we possess. It may be something we practice. And the way we practice it is the story we leave behind. Perhaps morality is neither found nor made. Not a star fixed in the sky, nor a tool forged in our hands. It is forged in the space between instinct and reason, where the pulse of empathy meets the weight of choice. Between what we are and what we hope to become, it flows in stories, in laws, in quiet acts of courage. It survives in rebellion, in the insistence that suffering matters, that dignity matters, that connection matters. It is imperfect, fragile, fleeting, but alive. And in each of us, it waits to be shaped, again and again, across lifetimes we will never witness. Morality is the conversation of humanity with itself. It is the echo of all who came before, the whisper to all who come after. It is not a law, it is a question, and we are the ones who must answer.